Before I start, can I ask the floor if there are any dying questions? Because if not, I will ask my dying question, which is, I think, how did you get involved in wildlife conservation, rescue, and and what is your favorite species? Since you rescue so many.
Okay. How did I end up with ACRES working on this cause is because of an Indian star tortoise who was kept illegally at the residential area where I was staying. When I was studying at NUS, there was a off-campus accommodation. So there was this Indian star tortoise who was endangered, walking around on a grass patch behind someone's unit. And coming from India myself, I've never seen an Indian star tortoise in the wild, so I was very, very upset to see one here in Singapore. And I used to work on wildlife back in India, so I reported there was no 24-hour hotline except ACRES hotline. So I called and spoke to Louis then, who came down and took the tortoise, and he shared that there was no rescue center in Singapore. This was 2005. So that was also quite shocking for me to hear that there was no wildlife rescue center to house rescued wild animals. So the tortoise would be sent to the zoo or, live tortoise museum, one of these facilities. So then Louis shared that we're going to build a rescue center in Singapore. That would be the first dedicated facility for rescued wildlife. And that's how I ended up volunteering. And after I graduated, I joined full time. Because Louis was literally, convincing me to stay. And it was supposed to be for 2 years, and it ended up to be now 16 years. Never stopped with the 2 years. It's a wonderful team to work with of supporters, staff members, volunteers, ex-staff members. It's a beautiful community who, I think they all come there with the same objective of making a difference for the animals. So it's not about climbing a career ladder, or there's no ladder to climb. There are ladders to climb at ACRES, but not a career ladder to climb.
So there's hope, don't worry, for those who are looking for a job at ACRES.
So it's a very good place to work on making a difference for the animals.
Okay. So actually ACRES was really only started because of that star tortoise incident.
The rescue center plans was already in plan by Louis, who is the founder of the organization. There were already 2 people working at ACRES. So ACRES was then focusing more on campaigns, which was fantastic. We were doing more outreach. But when we built the rescue center, there was more and more focus on rescue of traffic wildlife first. But then the hotline, which was launched to handle traffic wildlife or tip-offs to our hotline, slowly people started calling us saying, hey, there's a bat that crashed on my window, there's a snake in my house, there's an injured bird in my balcony. So we started off with like 13 calls a month. Now we handle about 1,400 calls a month. So we saw that there was a need in Singapore community for wild animals in distress.
How do people know to kind of like, how do you make people aware that ACRES is the one to be the hotline to call, right? For example, okay, I need to call police, so I call 999, right? But how do we know, like, what is the 7-digit number of ACRES to call?
So the who do we call is, please don't say Ghostbusters. Who do we call has been a burning question for a long time. So a lot of people, they choose to call 999 for a long time. The police used to call us saying, we received a call, there's a cobra in this place, come and do something. So we do continue to raise awareness. So the standard thing that we ask people to call us is when they see wildlife in distress. So the wild animal is injured or is displaced or in someone's house or looks a bit lost. So they can call us, but also they can call us if in doubt. So at least we can tell you that, actually it's okay to let the animal be. It's no need to worry, just let the animal be, and most people are okay with it. It's just that they didn't know what action to take when they call us in the first place. Maybe that's the first time they're seeing a monkey in their life, in the wild, outside their home house. So we give the benefit of doubt. That's why I feel that Maybe 10 years ago, compared to 10 years ago, now we have, I wouldn't say 1,700 calls a month, I would say 1,700 opportunities to talk to public who call us. So we would like to see it that way.
Right, right. Oh, fantastic. I mean, like, I think receiving 1,700 calls a month is a lot. And yeah, and there is obviously a need. And I think maybe that is really the purpose of today's talk as well. It's really to talk about our wow neighbors that I think a lot of us have been hearing more frequently about and to hear about this campaign. So I think one of the questions is really what is our wow neighbor? Why is it called our wow neighbor? And what is this campaign about? So maybe we can, I guess, inform the audience about this as well. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So we all have neighbors, right? We have neighbors that we love, neighbors that we may not love so much, but we choose to coexist with, we choose to learn to coexist. So similarly, the animals who are in our community, wild animals and community animals, they also share the space. They also form a part of the community. So it becomes our responsibility also to learn to live with our wild neighbors. So as the name goes, they live in the same space. They share the space and they are wild in nature. So our Wild Neighbours campaign was started because we realized that many of the groups like us, we are all working towards the same objective. We are all trying to raise funds towards coexistence. Some of us specialize more on certain native wildlife. Some of them do more on veterinary or rehabilitation. So we realized that we are all working towards a particular goal when it comes to coexistence. So we wanted to put all our strengths together, join forces to start this initiative. Like most campaigns, we want a three-letter acronym. So we went with our Wow Neighbours, which is OWN. Own. We own this thing. Yes, we own this thing.
Right.
So we launched it last year through a website called, which is ourwildneighbours.sg. So just remember it's a UK spelling. So the Wild Neighbours is OURS.sg. So it was launched by Minister Desmond Lee, and we put up all the advisory to focus on certain animals. But what we also did was, this year we are so happy and excited to have a campaign manager for the program. The program is now supported by Mandai Nature for 1 year. So, but our campaign manager is based at Acres, who is Jasmine. I think some of you may have seen her project.
Jasmine, say hi.
So we know Jasmine from before because she has worked on mechanical conflict issues, specifically at Acres. So she has had that experience in coexistence topics. So if you're wondering what OWN does, is mainly the outreach, because I think we believe that a lot of people care about wildlife, but they may be not in the zone of being aware. So we need to activate these people to turn into catalysts so they can speak up on issues that matter, particularly related to coexistence. A lot of times, I think NPACs or other agencies may hear from a small group of people who may be inconvenienced by the animals. So they hear complaints, right? But there's a majority who are either sitting on the fence or they are not writing in to say that I am okay with the chickens, I am okay with the crows. You know, I understand that the crows are nesting, so they will be defensive, so I'm okay with the crows. So we hope that we activate the members of the community who will speak up on wildlife issues. And the three main objectives is to raise awareness, to empower everyone with wildlife etiquette, do's and don'ts when you see wildlife. And number three is to showcase the ongoing rescue, rehab, and release efforts. So a lot of people may not even know there's an otter working group, and it includes, Acres, NPACs, the zoo, NUS. Then there are members of public who are otter watchers who go around. They know exactly, yes, they know who is with who gave birth to who eats where, everything. They are following. They are so dedicated, passionate group of people. So many members of public may not know that so much effort is actually put into these wildlife working groups. That's something we want to highlight as well to the general public.
So do they have to be part of like a working group to be involved in the whole campaign, or like how do they, like I as a, like an audience or like, so today I'm an individual and then I say, okay, I want to help this campaign, right? Because I love animals and I want to do something for them. So what can I guess, as an individual, do for this? Yeah.
So the old campaign has a lot of groups, featured groups, including SWAG. We have author working group, aside acres and parks in the zoo. We have Nature Society. I think I might be missing some very easily. So there are a lot of other groups who do very important work who are part of this initiative. So when we welcome new people coming in with their groups, it would be great to raise awareness. Say, for example, if you're working at a company and you're going to organize the Earth Day, for example, in April, and you want to do some sort of coexistence messaging as part of the event, we can give you the old materials to do it. So you don't have to start from scratch. So you don't even have to be your own member to be part of the movement. So, and we are also trying to reduce the duplication of efforts. Like, for example, if this is doing something that if we put all together, we can be doing the same coexistence messaging across. And I guess that is how the voice also becomes stronger. Collectively together. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Before I continue, do you guys have any questions? Yeah. So I think the question, for those who couldn't hear, her question is, what is your take on zoos, right? The animals, and there are some people who feel like captive animals are absolutely important, and then some who feel like these animals that are captive in zoos will not be able to survive. So what is, I guess, Acre's take on this, because you save a lot of, obviously captive released animals as well. Yeah.
So maybe I will give a little bit of history to this. I can share my personal opinion when the mic is taken off me with you. On the Acres opinion. So I think we have worked on improving captive animal welfare for a long time, and we have worked with the different zoo communities in the region, from Malaysia to Singapore Zoo as well, in Japan, in Indonesia as well. There were several substandard zoos where animals were not provided proper welfare. We are talking about pig-style enclosures. We're talking about terrible circus-style shows which have no educational value, and it involves terrible training methods for the animals. So we have spoken on those issues, and I believe now we are at a state where we have a good working relationship with the zoo community, where if there is something, we do have a closed door dialogue session, so we can, have a chat and propose the recommendation, which could be a short-term or long-term recommendation. Sorry, I think there's some feedback. So maybe just to give a little bit more history to the background, is that Acres was founded because of Singapore. Our founder was volunteer at the zoo as a chimp photographer, and the baby chimp was used as a photo prop where people pay money. This was a long time ago. And she was abused, which he witnessed, and he spoke up and he was fired. And he started a campaign, and that was the first campaign that had a win, and the baby chimp photo session was stopped by the Zoom. So we are talking about progress and positive changes, so which is a good thing. However, if I can move on to a world that is ideal for all animals, I would personally wish to watch wild animals in the wild. But increasingly, a lot of zoos are progressing to moving away from purely recreation to more on conservation. So there are efforts that are put in by zoos to work on conservation. But if I were to share my personal opinion, I would prefer watching wildlife in the wild.
Yes, definitely. Same. I think a lot of us feel the same way here, and I guess that's why we're all here to, hear more about this campaign and also know more about your work. Yes, go ahead.
The case for sea aquarium is different, right? The case for sea aquarium.
So the question is the case for the I guess the treatment, the treatment of the animals in the marine aquarium. So I think a lot of us, we enjoy seeing the fishes in the tanks, but and the dolphins and the whales in like SeaWorld and all that, but do we really know of what goes behind the scenes? Do we know?
So yeah, that is a very good question. I like how this is going from coexistence to captive cetaceans. So it's good. I thanks so much for asking these questions. These are topics that are close to our hearts as well. So we did a campaign on captive dolphins at Resorts World. So science has proven that marine mammals, bears, big cats, they don't do well in captivity, and elephants, they don't do well in captivity. No matter how much you provide, they do not cope well suited for captivity. So many progressive zoos would phase out keeping certain animals. Like for example, India is phasing out keeping elephants in captivity. There are other countries as well who are progressing. Like if I were to go back to India and open a dolphinarium, I cannot. It's not allowed under the law to keep dolphins in captivity. So there's a lot of progresses that's made around the world because people chose to speak up and the government, decided to put the commitment to make that change. So definitely marine mammals in captivity is a big no. Particularly when we are talking about purely for entertainment and commercial purposes, it's even a bigger no. It's definitely not good for their welfare. And for Resorts World specifically, they were 27 dolphins who were caught from the wild from a very unsustainable population at Solomon Islands. And they were brought in, at least 4 of them died even before the facility opened. So there was even a lawsuit that was filed in the Philippines by Earth Island Institute. So all being said, as we speak, there are dolphins who are working every single day to be photographed with public. And you have to remember that I have very good friends who work at the zoo, by the way. So there are people who care about animals who work at the zoo. So it is for the dolphinarium at Resorts World, we did have a dialogue. They actually stopped their plans for whale sharks. There was going to be an exhibit with whale sharks before. So, but the dolphins continued to happen. The plan went ahead. There was a lot of awareness thanks to many people who, there was a lot of media articles. Audrey was also here. There was a lot of support in terms of raising awareness, which played a crucial role. But we have to remember that people are still willing to pay that $70 to take photos with the dolphins in that pool, in that concrete pool. So the business will continue as long as people are willing to pay. So that is the problem that we have. We have to continue to raise awareness, to put pressure, basically ask people to boycott it. Then we will see an end to this work.
But I actually have a question about this because these aquariums they are obviously selling their tickets as we are a conservation coming from a conservation point of view. I know I have serious doubts about that myself, but they say that if we don't show the younger generation these animals in these tanks, then they can't learn about it if they don't, because they won't go out there in the wild, obviously. So if we don't have it in these tanks, how are these young people going to ever learn about these large animals?
So I think that is a very good question, and I do face this question from quite a few parents as well. And I cannot speak, I don't have that experience because I grew up in a village. So we constantly had chickens and animals coming in and out of the house. So we had that luxury of that exposure. One thing I always wonder is if you talk to kids nowadays, you show a sticker, right? Sorry, this is not a sticker of dinosaur, but if you show a sticker of dinosaur and ask a kid to identify what type of dinosaur it is, and what do they eat, what sound they make, they will tell you. And no one has ever seen a dinosaur. So we can market these animals to inspire children, to educate them in the right direction, instead of having to put them in a tank, which has absolutely zero educational value, because even some of the animal shows that you see, bears don't cycle in the wild. We used to have zoos that have like bears cycling or tigers posing with people. So we need to move away from that mentality, I think. And in Singapore, we have this very unique, beautiful opportunity. I don't think anywhere in the world you can go to one of the world's busiest airports, land there, 25 minutes later, 30 minutes later, you can be at a primary rainforest, at Botanic Gardens. And another 25 minutes taxi ride, you can be at a casino, and another 30 minutes you can be at a wetland watching a wild crocodile in the wild. So nowhere in the world we have this beautiful package. And we can, I think by Green Plan 2030, we'll have all these parks that are 10 minutes walk from every household. So we have so many opportunities to watch and observe wildlife in the wild. So we don't have to see them like that or interact with them to appreciate them.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like my nieces, they're like 7 years old, but they can immediately tell me how a T-Rex looks like. Yeah, I know what it sounds like. So yes, you're right. They don't have to be in tanks or in enclosures for us to learn.
Yeah, and also with the advancement in technology, there are facilities which are opening up with, I hope I'm using the right term, holographic projections, and which is kind of a lot more interactive and sensory experiences. I know we don't want to go into technology and move away from nature, but maybe for those who don't have that opportunity to travel further away to experience nature, I'm sure most cities will come up with this kind of experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks so much. Are there any other questions that you guys would like to ask? If not, I'm going to ask you about your most exotic wildlife rescue in Singapore. What has been the one animal that has, I guess, your favorite animal, or maybe one rescue that has really been on the mind since?
If you ask for my favorite animal, I don't really have a favorite, but if there is something, I'll open my wallet and donate immediately for farm animals. So that is something farm animals are close to my heart, and like chickens and goats and stuff. The sole animal would be capybaras for me, but if you say capybaras, they're so cute. I know it's kind of trending so well on social media that I'm actually worried that people will
No, I'm just Daphne's friend.
And they are so friendly.
Daphne's friend.
They can be from coexistence because they are so friendly to other animals. So about the exotic animal rescue, in 2011. We got a call in the evening for a 4-meter long white color snake at Convos 17th Avenue. So, if you're familiar with Convos 17th Avenue, near Convos 17th Avenue. Yeah, it's a lot of vegetated area. Now there's a lot more private housing. Okay. So we got a call. I went down with my colleague, and the snake was huge. So when the snake saw us, she went inside the bushes, and we couldn't catch. But we told the construction site that it's okay, tomorrow morning she will come out, you'll give us a call. And also we didn't have a carrier that can fit that 4-meter long snake. So we didn't tell that openly. So we went back. Don't worry, we'll handle it. We'll handle. So also the guys were like looking at us, I don't think this girl can catch, right? So we went back.
Did they look at me and say, oh, I think she cannot catch this?
Actually, we get that a lot. Yeah, we do get that a lot in the past. So sometimes they will say that, hey, I told you it's a 2-meter long python, why they send women? So don't worry, we have broken all those stereotypes now. We have a lot of women. So our rescue officers who are guys, right? They actually, when they see a huge truck, construction site, all that, they will, by default, they will ask your fellow female rescue officer to take the lead. It actually also helps to break the stereotype and to tell people that as long as you're trained, you don't need the strength and power. If you respect the behavior and handle, you can handle. So going back to the snake, next morning we actually got the call. We went down. It was a 4-meter long Burmese python, an albino, beautiful. Usually for big pythons, I can use one hand to hold their head. For this python, I had to use 2 hands to hold their head. She was so large. And she was beautiful, one eye blind, she's albino. So my first thought that came to my mind was, someone who kept this. Wow. Okay. Chocolate. So it's very easy to distract us with food. So someone kept this large python for probably a couple of decades and decided one morning to abandon her and think that she will fend for herself. Can you imagine a white color albino python on a green grass, and they are ambush predators, so they need to hide at night. she's probably going to starve herself and die. Yeah. So that's what shocked me, that someone who was illegally eating this animal probably paid a few $1,000 and fed whatever they were feeding, and one day just dumped the animal. So she lived with us for about, she passed away during COVID 2021, so about 10 years with us, but she already had health issues. But that story always stayed in my mind because recently, 2 years ago, we rescued two radiated tortoises who are native to, since I've been talking for a lot, guess which country they are native to. There is an animation movie of the name of the country.
Rio, the guess.
So,
Madagascar.
radiated tortoises, yes.
Madagascar.
I was about to say, I like to move in with them. Yes, from Madagascar. So,
Good one, thank you.
Nice. You can sing, go ahead.
yes, so that critically endangered, which means the next step is going extinct. Extinct is scary, right? Dinosaur extinct. So critically endangered, people still feel a bit relaxed because it's
still alive.
endangered. Yeah. And they are critically endangered. Only a few thousand left in Madagascar. And guess what? At Acres Wildlife Rescue Center, we have 6 of them. And that is a disturbing fact that we go to sleep with. That means we have a huge problem here, and whatever we rescue, they are tip of the iceberg because someone kind enough, aware enough, saw this prohibited exotic animal and decided to give us a call. And there are so many that doesn't get detected, maybe died because they were abandoned, who knows, right? So we have 2 of them with a leopard tortoise that were put in a cardboard box and left at the bin center of a condo. So these animals at their size, they go for a 5-digit figure in black market, by the way. So, but someone who kept and dumped them. So that these kind of stories, until today, it's like it's mind boggling. Yeah, stories that I don't still understand what goes on in people's minds.
So they would pay 5 figures to buy this thing, and then later on they decide, sorry, I don't want to do this. Instead of putting it on, like, I don't know, donating it to a zoo, they rather just like put it
in a bin center. Yeah, that is what. And the security guard was kind enough to give us a call to say that there's something here. So. And I just feel that as a little red dot, if we can have such a negative impact on some animals in Madagascar, I think we can have a bigger positive impact for more animals. So I think that's a potential that we have not realized, that is within all of you here, within us, and also for you to be a catalyst when you go out of here tonight. Yeah.
So I think the question is, what are the challenges of repatriating these animals?
So thanks for asking that, Audrey. So it's a huge challenge. Smuggling is so much faster and I wouldn't say easier. Not speaking from experience, but I just feel like smuggling is, it's planned and people bring them in, but for repatriation, number one, the animal needs to be suitable. We cannot be idealistic, dreamy about, every wild animal belongs in the wild and we just chuck them out and they don't survive. So we need to make sure they are fit enough to be able to learn foraging in the wild and survive in the wild. Number 2 is finding where they are from. So for some animals, it's a bit straightforward. For some, they have a wider distribution range. So we may have to do a DNA work to find out which population they are from and get the proper permits and approvals from the receiving country. When we ship our Indian star tortoises back to the wild, the authorities I spoke to have never heard of repatriation effort before. So it was an opportunity for us to talk about, hey, we want to bring back those that actually belong here, they came from here. And they came here for inspection. They were actually flown here to inspect our facility to see whether we are saying the truth, whether we have actually so many tortoises. And it was a very interesting experience. And of course, we need to find out a partner organization because we can't just go and throw the animals back, right? So they need to work all the paperwork, who knows the country's government agency, and then also do the monitoring after the release. So there's a soft release, there's a rehab, Some of the tortoises we sent, 4 or 5 of them failed rehabilitation. So they would just sit there and starve themselves. Like they would not eat the wild vegetation until they see carrots and sweet potatoes first. So they were quite spoiled here that they would not eat the wild vegetation. So they live at the sanctuary. We can't force them to be wild. But the rest of them did a great job being rehabilitated and they had a second chance. And of course, the next step is funding. So we read every tortoise costed about $1,000. So we had to raise over $1,000 to ship them back. And for 1 year of monitoring, for predator proofing the enclosure, because mongooses and leopards come there with the site where we release. And pick a transmitter so we can track them. So a lot of work that is put in behind. So those are the main challenges. But there are some animals who would never go back to the wild because of the terrible illegal wildlife trade, which involves exactly what happened to Vanilla, the Burmese python that I was talking about. She was an albino. She never had a wild. She had one eye blind. She had other internal issues. We have quite a few African ball pythons who are morphs, meaning they have patterns, they have different shapes, body patterns or colors as well. So they do not have a wild at all because they are bred in captivity. They are bred selectively to select a certain trait, either a color or a pattern. So they retain the trait over generations. So they usually come in with a lot of hereditary issues, genetic issues like blindness or coordination problems. So they all will have to live their lives in captivity.
So how do you, I mean, it costs a lot to like, I mean, I had cats and cats are probably one of the cheapest pets to have, but you run a rescue center full of different wild animals, so you do need, how do you manage that in terms of like expertise? Because obviously not everyone is a reptile expert, not everyone is an expert in birds. How are the operations of Acres runs like? What is like maybe the cost like, right? People would like to know what that is.
So it is true, you're so right on the challenge about expertise because sometimes we get an animal that we have never seen in our life before. Because illegal wildlife gives you the surprises, the worst kind of surprises sometimes. So once we had a call for a monkey in Bordeaux, we went down, it was a shrunk marmoset monkey. It was a primate. And the primate did not make it through, had terrible skeletal deformities because whoever kept the animal did not give a diet that had proper calcium. So we did not expect to see a marmoset there. So we have to constantly upgrade ourselves, our knowledge on what are the trends in the species that are being smuggled. We even monitor what's happening on Telegram to see what are the species that are being illegally sold or bought or kept or being asked for. So we are in the know in the trends, but also our animal care team, which is managed by Kalai, my fellow co-CEO. They also, we have in-house training that also external training and workshops where they are sent either for attachments or conferences or workshops. Thanks to the end of the COVID period, we can bring them out again for actual workshops, not over Zoom. So they can also be updated from other rescue centers and sanctuaries. So we don't have to start from scratch. To operate our rescue center, currently we have to spend about 100,000 a month, including staff salaries. So I am not very proud, but at the same time, also slightly, it makes me feel good that we have this very passionate team of staff and volunteers who are all graduates. Ram raising funds, he graduated in biotechnology, biological sciences. So, and he's doing fundraising now. So he started off as a volunteer, then got brainwashed to join us. So you just keep nagging people, come join us. I'm gonna nag at her later today.
So once you get it, you can't get out.
So we have a very good team of staff, ex-staff also who continue to volunteer, and donors and supporters, which makes a big difference. I think it makes our life livable. We constantly worry about the funds needed. Our staff are not very highly paid as well, so they are really there to make a difference every day. I don't come to work, right? I live at work. I have an enclosure in Coexistence, and so I live there. It's a beautiful place, cannot complain. I don't think you can ever get, a job that you love and then live on landed property. Dogs and chickens, yeah. So I'm very grateful. But my other colleagues have traveled from very far. And if you have been to Acres, Acres is quite not so accessible. I think Wilma knows very well as well. It's not accessible, but once you come there, you will not leave. So I'm very grateful for that. But just to pay the rental for the place, to buy food for the animals, like you mentioned, we have diverse species. So there's suddenly one day birds who drink only nectar. There's birds who only eat fish. There's birds who only eat insects. There's birds who only eat fruit. They are frugivores who eat only fruit. So we have to be prepared for all kind of diets, formula diet. When they are under critical care, we need to provide critical care diet, which means we need to provide fluids and all that alongside as well. So as running a wildlife rehab facility is quite expensive. Of course, we have tortoises who are like 45 kilos and they eat 7% of their body weight every meal. So it's quite, they eat a lot. They're just bulldozers walking around eating food the whole day. So we need to make sure we have the resources to feed them as well. So that alone comes to about, some people tell us that it's quite low for an organization who works 24 hours. That is really because we try to keep everything at Acres, furniture, all donations and fine. So we try to source for other things so we can direct more funds for the animals there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it does cost a lot to run a wildlife center that has like different types of requirements, dietary requirements, right? And that's quite an expensive trip. Yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we can only do what we can and we try our best. And I think that's quite important. Actually, I have some questions that were written in. So I'll ask that first. How can people react appropriately to wildlife if they are afraid of them? So, for example, like you said, you see a python, obviously you're so scared, you're scared they'll strangle you and then you run away, or some people might say that, oh, it's gonna like bite me because they don't know that they strangle, they don't mean it bite. So, what can people do, I guess, so that maybe they can carry out their own rescue efforts as well? I don't know, like if the animal's not too seriously injured, they can kind of sit back to help.
So the two parts of the question, thanks so much for asking that, because a lot of times when we think about living in harmony may extend to, let me rescue and take off this animal, right? So I'll come to that part. Number one, if you're very scared of a certain animal, always think of what other things you are scared of, right? So I am there, let me just, is this being recorded? Don't worry. So I am terrified of cockroaches. So yeah, see, welcome to the club. It's not because I hate them. It's a very mental thing where many legs, very fast and fly towards you. Right? When you want to get away, they fly towards you. So
Pigeons are like that. I'm very scared of pigeons.
you should come to it.
This is why I never go, because Roma says there's a pigeon that visits the toilet. Very scary.
There's one who's like looking at you when you're on the shower. So they're all weird kind of animals and creatures. But I always tell that what else are you scared of that's not living? It could be flying, it could be even using, closed spaces, claustrophobia. So, but we work around it. We try to work around it to live our lives, to go on with our lives. So that's something that we usually ask for. Just equip yourself with some knowledge about these animals. So at least you prevent the fear first. So usually people hurt because of the fear. Sorry. Yeah, water. It's okay. What? It's being changed already. So I think that is one step, which is we remove that fear. Then we will automatically will not do anything that will be harming the animal or yourself as well. We have rescued speaking cobras who had about 10 rubber bands around their snout.
How did they even get there to tie that 10 rubber bands in the first
So we were
place?
telling them, if you're so scared, you should, oh, thank you so much. You should not be getting so close and putting rubber bands around their mouth. And it also puts and it also puts us at risk because we have to hold the cobra now and remove. And if a cobra with something like that is going to be very, very angry. So I don't even know how they manage to do it that way because you would get stabbed at, right? With cobra spit venom. So anyway, they did it. And that is what people do out of fear because they just want to get rid of the animal either or do something that puts them at danger and animal at danger. So 3 golden rules when you encounter wildlife. You don't know what species it is, you don't know the behavior, appreciate from a distance, increase the distance between you and the animal very slowly. Increasing the distance is the best way to diffuse any situation, whether it's a conflict, animal in conflict or human being in conflict. So you just increase the distance. And number 3 is, of course, don't use flash photography. It triggers a defensive response. It is just natural because they are not like us. So when they see a flash of light, it can trigger a defensive response. So the increasing the distance is golden rule, particularly when you're scared of animals. But the second part where you're past the stage, you love animals, maybe you've had some experience handling wildlife, and you think, okay, I saw a snake, I will take the snake. I will, document photographs, keep it for a few days, then I will release. And the law does not allow you to do this now. Under the Wildlife Act, you need a permit to kill, take, and keep. That's how the law defines it. So you cannot take and keep wild animals, protected wild animals. So and it's also not good for, not only for you, but also for the wild animal. Because imagine you are suddenly taken in by a stranger and put inside. Even though the stranger has all the good intentions, right? Sounds like this kidnapping horror. But it's not a good thing for the animal. It's a lot of fear and stress. And things can go wrong also. So it's best not to do that. Call NParks or ACRES for advice. NParks also has a 24-hour hotline. So we will be able to advise what can be done and what should be done. Baby animals definitely. They look very helpless, poor thing, the eyes and all that, right? Don't fall for it. Don't bring home the baby animal because most often the parents are around. The mother might be around, or for birds, the parents are around. So always look for a nest, and if you don't know, also the problem is the baby birds look nothing like their parents. So they are naked, they have no fur, feather, they look very different. So you might not know which parent to look out for. Send us a photo, WhatsApp us, we will tell you that, oh, this is a spotted dove. So you can Google and find out what a spotted dove looks like. You can look for the nest. So that way you can, if in doubt, call us. Otherwise, don't bring home anything. Because if you bring home and keep for 2-3 days and then call us, usually our rescue officer will get into a bad mood and advise you differently. So best to save the day and call us on the spot with a photo or video.
Oh, okay. That is very useful information because my friend had a flamingo, I think, I don't know, it just like fell into her house and, I guess it was in her house, so she had to do something about it. So she called ACRES, so that was good. But the ACRES officer went up to her and said, "Okay, don't worry if you hear this, but it's going to cry like a baby." So they put a blanket over it and started squealing like a baby. Yeah. So yes, so she did the right thing. Call ACRES.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, any questions? Yes.
How do we tell when the animal is stressed? This animal don't stay around outside my flat. They sit out there. Then it's like it did it for a few hours. They record my procedure. Then I open it some water. They kill it. So it's just using to press my house.
What animal is this? Sorry, pigeon.
Emerald.
Emerald dove. Okay. So I think
I need to repeat that question. So how do you know if the animal is in distress? Because we had an emerald dove that flew into his house and sat there for a while. Sorry?
Here is my flat.
Yeah.
I want to follow it.
Oh yeah, so flew near his in front of
Thank
his
you.
and basically fed it some water and
I thought it's injured, so it couldn't move. So I think over the
and then it will.
So yeah, how do you tell?
Thank you for doing that, giving a little stopover for the emerald girl. So sometimes when this happens, it's whatever you did it is good in the sense that you're observing the animal first, what he or she is doing. So sometimes some birds may crash onto something and land in a balcony or on a ground on the floor and stuff like that. But if you're in doubt, if you see that, oh, the wing is down, the animal is not responding to your presence. So I'm not asking you to go and check every bird who's resting, but if you think that this is odd, this bird is here, you can see the rest. You check again in 20-30 minutes. If the bird is still there, there's visibly any blood, of course, if there's injury. But if the bird's wing is down and it's not moving about, there's no reflex to your presence if you're there, then something could be wrong. Sometimes we still ask you to wait for a while because sometimes birds can crash into something and get a bit concussed, but they will recover after a period of rest. It could be up to 1 hour sometimes. They will just stone for a while, then they'll fly off. So when that happens, it's good. It's a good outcome. But usually we go by either physical injury, visible injury where there's blood or feathers thrown around, or there's a lot of feces in one place, which means the bird has sat there for a very long time. Please do discount cases where the bird is there overnight. Of course, birds like pigeons, they don't fly at night time. They will not take off. Even if you approach it, they will not take off. They are sleeping. Some pigeons actually sleep on HDB void deck, They just raining heavily, had a late night, they just and they don't fly. When you walk also, they will pop up to them, they are just looking at you and they're not flying away. So it's interesting how they adapt to the urban environment. What did you call us? It's okay. They will fly off in the morning. Also, if you see a bird at 7-8 story, that like sitting there, definitely the bird flew from somewhere. The bird can take off. So it's okay, no need to worry. But if in doubt, you can always give us a call. If in doubt, always give us a call.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Yeah, I think we can't really tell if an animal is really in distress because we don't know technically what it looks like. So I guess always in doubt, call Icarus. Is it?
Yeah, I think we cannot expect everyone to be aware of every single animal, right? The most common one is birds. So at least we can empower people that birds you can do. Sometimes bats are on the ground, they get grounded. Maybe they're spawning, they eat the insects which are already consumed the poison, then they're on the ground, they need a little bit of help. Sometimes they get disoriented, they get grounded. Inside your house, turn off the ceiling fans, lights, open the windows, give 20-30 minutes, the bat will fly out. But if the bat is on the ground, unable to move or fly but crawling around, that means the bat needs a little bit of lift off. So it depends, like fruit bats can take off from the ground, insectivorous bats cannot take from the ground. So we might even ask you to use the towel, take the bat, go downstairs, put on a tall, rough tree trunk, the bat will climb up and then take off. So we may even ask you to do that, but not to use bare hands, but use towel or some barrier.
Yeah. I think the reason of not to use bare hands is also because a lot of these, obviously they're wild animals and they carry all sorts of diseases, right? And
yeah, so the diseases part is a very good, widespread fear, I think. So one thing I usually always highlight is fear makes you do the wrong things. So it's important to have an informed fear. You can be cautious, but don't be fearful. So take caution when you approach a wild animal. So for example, if we use the toilet, we don't wash hands, and we go and eat food with our hands, what do we get? We can get typhoid. Right? Water could be contaminated, your hands are not clean, it's a fecal oral route. Same thing goes for animals. It's basic hygiene. If you have pigeons congregating in your window next to your aircon, make sure you clean it properly. Don't inhale the dust. Fecal dust. So if the feces goes into your system, you can have issues. It can cause fever, it can cause severe problems like meningitis, depends on what the pigeon is carrying, which you and I would never know what the pigeon was carrying. So just take all the precautions. So when we handle wild animals, use a barrier. Even though we are trained, we always use a glove because wild animals can bite if they are stressed. So that's why we are always asked to use a barrier because sometimes out of fear when they realize they get bitten, people can be scared for a long time, wondering what's going to happen to them.
Yeah, true. I think it can be quite scary because you don't know if the animal carries any type of diseases that may transmit. I think ever since COVID also, that has been an issue. Actually, that was one of the questions I wanted to find out is because, COVID happened because wildlife kept in close proximity, different types of wildlife kept in close proximity, increase the risk of disease transmission. So I guess ACRES, you have a lot of different types of wild animals. How do you kind of prevent that from happening within the center? I mean, obviously they're kept not in cramped conditions, but I think chances of cross-spreading of diseases is so high.
I think that's a great process to think about as well. So when you have animals in captivity, stress is a big factor. So many of us may also carry pathogens, but we don't express it until there's a stress factor. For example, certain times of the month, females' immune system can be a bit low, not so functioning well. That's when you get infections because the immune system is not on the top notch to protect your body. The same thing with animals who are under stressful conditions. So at ACRES itself, we don't have that kind of overcrowding because in wet markets, the wildlife is harvested and slaughtered for food. They're usually not fed for hours, for days, because feeding them that means they will defecate, then you have to clean, it smells bad, when they slaughter, the body smells bad. We actually got it in recordings when we did our wet market campaign here in Singapore. So people don't feed them. So when they are not fed, they are starving, they are hungry, that's when their immune system goes down. And they're also in the presence of so many species. So in ACRES, we make that distinction. Of course, they are fed very well, sometimes a bit too well. And then we have the barriers in between them. So we won't house an animal like like a small mammal next to a python. So there's this distinction that they don't
That would be very scary.
Yeah, so they don't even smell, they shouldn't be able to smell each other. Yeah, because they work mostly on smell. Like small animals, they are very sensitive to smell.
Okay, that's really good to know because I think that is something that was always in my mind when we think about rescue centers, because rescue centers, you just receive whatever you get from outside.
So that is a very difficult decision to make sometimes, so we don't take in, say, radiotherapy. Even though they are turtles, just like the Chinese striped-necked turtle, who is a critically endangered species, but they are not allowed to be kept as pets. But radiotherapy, unfortunately, Singapore still continues to import and sell them at like $5 to $10 to $14 per turtle. And they are the same turtles. They also live very long. They need all the, diverse environments, but they are still allowed to be kept as pets. So we have to make a distinction that as long as the pet trade allows in this, we cannot take them in because we will be full like this, and we will never have the space for other animals who actually need the space. And we are not solving the problem by just keep on rescuing these animals.
Yeah.
Because the trade continues.
You're just enabling the trade by taking them in, right?
Same thing for birds who are kept as pets. They're also wild animals, but we don't take them in because the bird trade is still legal in Singapore. We will be never ending.
Yeah.
It's a difficult decision.
Actually, I have a question about the pigeon problem. I mean, besides me being afraid of pigeons, that's the other thing. But I've got friends, I think Sadie would know, with a friend with a pigeon problem, She has pigeons that are... Sadie, maybe you'd like to ask this question on behalf of our friend who's not here tonight.
Is it that the pigeons they gather around her area and they just stay around and...
Yeah, and I guess they defecate all over and in front of her house. And I think she's complained to town council, which I guess is not great, right? I mean, it's like she loves animals too, but that's a bit too much.
Yeah. I think the part about where pigeons come and poop.
Yeah.
Where do they poop again? Sorry. In the windowsill?
Yeah, I think it's the windowsill area.
Okay, so that means your immediate neighbor one level up is feeding.
I'm gonna call her now. Mystery solved.
So either one level or two levels, somebody up there is feeding. So then they all congregate. So pigeons will, I think I gave a media response. White crows actually gather and talk a lot in the evening. right? They go gaga. So they actually they are communicating with each other about where did you get enough food? Is there a food source? I think this is like they are sharing a lot of information about where to get your morning meal because they are roosting at night there. But pigeons congregate, but they don't talk like this. But they are congregating for food. They will only come together for food, and they are such creatures of time. They are very punctual about timing. So our first feed at acres is 7, right? 6:45 the pigeons will line up. It's still not so bright. So you can see the shadows and they're all like it's really 1 arm distance. And because when they groom, they things cannot touch each other. They're very specific about it. That's why pigeons will roost. It's a way to prevent parasites going from one bird to another. So they need the space for grooming. So they will stay away from each other. And they will congregate so close only for food. Mainly for food. So there's someone who's feeding above, either before the time where you see or after. So they are preparing themselves for it. That is a very, very likely reason that's happening. So the town council can investigate that, or you can also talk to your friends and see if there's any information on their wild neighbors. Then you can follow up.
I have a question. So, is that okay? Yeah. Okay, so my nephew is terrified of animals. It didn't start off that way, as in he's 7 this year, and I think it started because he was, usually the stories, he was chased by a dog, and then I think my sister is a little bit scared of big dogs as well. So I think because she was anxious, he became anxious, and over time this became, I think, something that's very hard for him to overcome. So recently I was cat sitting, and he came over to my place, and he was terrified, like he was jumping on the sofa, he was hiding, just running away from the cat. So I'm just wondering how I can kind of language a little bit differently with him so that I can help him to kind of maybe start to be a little bit more comfortable and kind of like be more comfortable coming nearer and just trying out being near animals. Yeah.
So I think for the benefit of people over there, the question is, she has a nephew who is a bit afraid of animals, and she's trying to find a way to kind of bridge that conversation, and how can she encourage her nephew to be, I guess, closer to love animals.
Yeah.
I think this is such a very relevant situation in many of our families' homes. Unfortunately, I don't have the knowledge on specifically working with children who may be fearful, and I don't want to say the wrong thing, give the wrong information. So I can share with what happened to me when I was young. So when I was young, about this height, very short, I love animals and all that stuff, but there was a dog whose name was also Anbu. He was a big Doberman, and it was my neighbor's dog, and I love dogs, but for some reason the dog escaped from the house, and the dog was a very friendly dog. It's like a baby, but he's big. He's as tall as me. So, and I yelled and ran from the neighbor's house to my house, and my family, my dad and mom and sisters, they were standing and laughing at me. Basically, they told me that they've never seen me run this fast. So, I'm screaming and running, and the dog is happy running after. Very excited. And so after that, my dad was a teacher, so they figured out that I was terrified of large dogs. So they got someone else who is nicer with, he is at ease with large dogs, and they got me to play with this boy, and in the dog's presence slowly. And I was more assured because I had a companion of the same size and age. He was at ease, so I felt a little bit more like, oh, I can also do this. Right? It seems like something that's possible. The dog is not hurting me.
Yes.
So I can work it. It worked for me, but I can't tell whether it will work for your
my nephew. I can try it out.
Unfortunately, I am not very knowledgeable in this topic, but that's something that can be quite good. Particularly a cat who is okay with kids, right? Like, and then a kid who is okay with the cat, and they could be the bridge for the experience.
Thank you.
That was
I've never told this Anbu dog story.
Now it's on there. Now we know. Yeah, so there are some people, like say for me, I'm interested in say some wildlife rescue if I can, but I'm afraid of pigeons. And say if I see an injured pigeon, which is possible, how would you suggest training? Like, do you provide training at acres for volunteers who want to do like rescue missions, I guess?
Yeah. Yes, we do train our rescue volunteers. All our rescue volunteers are trained first by us, and most often we find that there are people who have actual phobia who actually join our volunteer training.
Oh, okay.
So, welcome. Yes.
Okay.
I will be with you throughout the whole process for the pigeons. Yeah. So we do train them, but usually with the first theory training, we don't use live animals for training for all the ethical reasons. And then when they go out for rescue calls with our trained rescue officers, they are trained on the job. So if there's a pigeon rescue, we will show them how to do it. In the next pigeon call, we will ask them to handle. In the next pigeon call, we will ask them to do the whole thing. We will observe and tell them what went well, what didn't. So it's a lot more on the job. And we have had volunteers who are terrified of snakes, who are now handling snakes. So it has always the first pigeon.
Okay.
So,
Got that.
yeah, so pigeons are quite, how do I say, they accept help readily.
Oh.
You know, when you rescue them, they are like, okay, I will surrender to this situation. You know, feed me, give me water, I will recover. Because they are so much easier to handle compared to say, koels, pigeons beat you up.
Oh,
You know, the pigeons who are with the long beak, they
yeah.
are eternally angry. They are very defensive, you know, they are in a defensive posture. We can profile birds, but pigeons are one of the, you know, the easygoing ones. Okay. You want to help me? Help me. They just come to you. So it's much easier to work with them. So I hope it will be a smooth process.
Yeah. Okay.
And I have to say, rescue volunteer training, usually the most challenging part is talking to people. It's not handling the animals. And it's the most important part. Imagine out of 1,700 people, we managed to educate 1,000 people that you don't have to call acres. We can reduce the need for acres. And that's our goal that we work towards. Eventually this is what our founder used to say, that eventually over years, if people know that I see a python in a canal, I don't have to call acres. They take a photo and post on Instagram and walk off. That is what we want. We don't want to be called when there's no need to call over time.
Very interesting. I am very mindful of time, and I was just wondering if you guys had any last questions to ask. Yes. Roma.
Yeah, can you say something about blue traps? Because
Blue
recently,
trap.
you know, there is quite a lot of press on it because of that baby silver, which when I saw my heart grow. So maybe talk a little bit about blue traps.
Yeah. So Roma wants to know more about, or rather, have Abu talk a little bit more about blue traps, and I guess the awareness of using blue traps. Because that I remember when I was much younger, it was always used. I see it all the time. Yeah.
Thank you, Vilma, for asking that. It's been blue traps are one of the most horrible things I think for animals. Because the animal doesn't die immediately, whether the animal who's trapped is a rat or a protected civet, or we have had owls who got stuck on a blue trap because they went for the rat who was stuck on a blue trap. So blue traps are horrible. Anyone is into arts here? Arts, crafts?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So if you have worked with glue, you know how irritating it is when it is stuck on you. And these are safe glue, you know. It's not like you cannot remove. Imagine an animal whose arms, legs, everything is stuck on it. So they usually die from hunger, stress, dehydration, and starvation. If they don't do that, they will usually die from blood loss because they are trying to free themselves by chewing their arms off. If you have watched one of those survival shows where people, they really self-mutilate to free themselves and they die from that. So it's a very prolonged suffering. And many countries have actually recognized it. So they have regulations in place, some countries, where either it's banned or it's regulated, which means only registered pest control operators can use for specific areas, which means everything else did not work, so they have to use blue traps. In Singapore, you can go to a DIY hardware shop and buy a blue trap. That's how bad it is now, and we want that to change over time. And always, if you're wondering about, so it is asking people to live with rats, right? So you can choose if you want pythons or rats. Pythons will feed on rats, but we have been having a lot of eateries, more and more F&B establishments opening up in the past and also over years. I'll just give you a big picture. We have been culling and removing crows a lot, who are very important scavengers in the urban system. So we remove one scavenger so the rats can party with more food available, right? Because crows are out of the picture. So then we have had increasing number of python calls over the past decade. So the more rats, pythons will come to the city. We take them, put in the forest, they will come back again because this is where the buffet is, the rats are there. So if we don't address the food sources, nothing will work. The blue trap is just a cruel, inhumane way to do something that is completely ineffective because we are not addressing the root cause. So if you have a rat issue, this has worked at acres. Acres is surrounded by greenery. That means we will have rats. We have had pythons also. I've seen 3-meter long pythons at acres. Reticulated pythons. Gorgeous, beautiful ones. So but we cook and eat at acres, we feed animals, there's going to be leftovers that the rats can come and take. So first thing we did, we meshed up. We spent some money, meshed up the whole place. Next thing, we started changing human behavior. A lot of times, animal management, ethical practices and wildlife management starts with human behavior. In Singapore, we often interfere at the animal level. We go in the wrong direction. So we have to look at human behavior first. So we told all the staff, volunteers using, when you open the bin, so we used to have a lift bin, throw and close, people don't close. So we changed it into a step bin. And we removed the trash bins. He said only one trash bin for food waste at acres. So you eat at office, you go to the volunteer lounge and throw the trash. I don't care, you have to walk, but you can't leave it in the office. So we started enforcing this over time, and we have a very, very manageable rat population who don't interfere with our food area. And the last thing we need to do is fill up all the gaps so the rats don't party, fall sailing at night. But we have to do this. That's the infrastructure habitat modification. So the answer to people who might wonder, what am I going to do with rats if I cannot use blue traps, is that do everything else that works. Because a blue trap actually doesn't work. It just looks like I took the rat. But it's so inhumane, it's cruel, and it doesn't solve any problem, and other wild animals get stuck. And this is a poor baby civet, who got stuck. And usually with fur and feathers, it's almost impossible to remove. We can't shave the fur because they need to have the insulation. So, and we removed the glue over about 2 weeks. And it's a baby, we can't release. So now we have to rehabilitate the civet for 3 more months before we release into the wild. And this poor thing is alone. And we put updates on our IG that it all could have been avoided if this person did not use it. Could be cost. It's a very cheap alternative, and it could be also a practice that's been done for a long time. So, and we don't have very strong positive case studies elsewhere who has completely banned it. So New Zealand has certain regulations, some states in Australia have, which they put some controls in place, but it's not completely banned. So if more and more countries do it, it's a possibility Singapore could follow suit, but at least we can push for some restrictions in place first, which means don't have blue traps openly on sale. Cats get trapped as well. Why should we have blue traps openly on sale? So yes, like agency. So I mean, this is not for really a public information, but we have been sharing about this in our wildlife working groups as well, to talk about how we can prevent this in the future, and we will probably start work on that separately.
So are we thinking about campaigning for like a policy, from a policy level, to say that this should be banned totally for sale? Because I think that might be the only effective thing. I mean, if they go out there and buy craft glue, then we can't help it, but at least we know that it's not that type of glue trap.
Yeah, so there are two types of campaigning, right? So 2 years ago, how many of you remember a civet who was killed with a blow dart? Yes, Vilma, do you remember? So there was in 2020 when the whole world was going crazy, right? People in COVID, people were blow darting pigeons. So they were dropping everywhere. Tampines, Jurong, people were calling us. We filed police report after police report saying someone holds a blow dart killing animals. Nobody better than I did. So 1 year later, a civet was killed with a blow dart, which was about this big. We're talking about 21, 22 centimeters long dart. So it went through one lung, entered the other lung, and the civet died. It's a young civet. So, and we realized that dart is available on Shopee, on Amazon Singapore. So the civet died, right? So pigeons was not a big thing, but when civet died, there was a big hoo-ha, there was a lot of attention. So we managed to work with, we wrote to police, SCF and ministers, and we rallied some support. There was a meeting with the Ministry of Home Affairs, and we asked that we looked into legislation across other countries, and we wrote a draft to say that we propose that blow darts not be sold in Singapore. Nobody needs a blow dart in Singapore. We can have blow darts, end of story. We don't need a blow dart. So it has been accepted after a few months, and they have accepted the recommendation, so it will be controlled, regulated over time. I mean, you can't bring in nunchucks and all that, so why do we need blow darts? This one, however, it is not a public safety issue. So it's going to take some time. But ACRES will continue to push for that change, mainly for the welfare of these animals. So if there is changes needed in the industry practices, whether if I'm a pest control operator, I need to make sure I check the trap every 2-3 hours or 6 hours. It might increase the cost of trapping to the customer, but so be it. It's for better welfare for the animals, then that should be implemented, or completely end the use of glue traps. So that would be the best. But I can tell you it's not a low-hanging fruit. Definitely.
We can try. Yeah, we can definitely try.
And that's why we're asking people to, if you have a pest control operator, tell them that you don't want glue traps in your house. End of story. You just keep pushing for it. Because currently glue traps is kind of the cheapest option available. So it may seem as an easy option to take.
Okay. Painful to hear, but necessary. So I am aware that we are at very close to 8:30, and this event is supposed to end at 8:30. So I'm just going to put it out there to ask if there are any more giant questions. Because I do have a few more that were asked. So I might just ask one more that was sent in. So I guess, how can members of the public like us speak for animals more effectively? So effective speaking, and how can and I understand that organizations like ACRES has worked with many other agencies, government agencies, and they cannot be seen as too outspoken, obviously, against other government agencies, because then you look like you are revolting. And so I wish for more active advocacy and voice for our wild neighbors and our wild animals, and I guess this is the same for everyone that's here. So I guess, maybe what is the take-home message for us as individuals? What can we do? Individually.
I think I agree with whoever sent the question in. It's a very delicate balance, but we agree to disagree. There are things that we work well together with the agency. There are things that we may not meet eye to eye, which is fine. We'll continue to speak up on the differences. Otherwise, we don't have to be around, right? If we cannot speak up on these things. So, as individuals, right, I have a huge hope and appeal and request to individuals, because a lot of times I was just talking about this to someone earlier. So to Yanlin, I think. So if I am going to an estate, say, let's just say, which estate do you live at? How come? Okay, great. How come, right? So if you call us saying the town council is poisoning the pigeons here, Acres do something about it. So if Acres goes, this has happened, this is deja vu. How come they have called us before? So we go down and we write to the MP, we write to the town council saying it is from Acres, we are receiving feedback from your residents about this. How does it look compared to you writing to your MP saying you live here and you don't agree that poisoning happens in my estate? And Acres has advocated for this. We have a template letter on our website, by the way, for MPs. You can copy paste, just put it in your letter to MP. So you can be advocates for your own wild neighbors. So please do that because you are the resident there. You have a much stronger voice compared to us who seen as organization. It's just gonna preach you, don't do this. So there's an opinion form compared to members of public who have their own voice. So I encourage you guys to write. Say if you study in a school and the school is using blue traps, rally support and write to your school estate management. Please stop using blue trap. Last night I learned what are the ill effects of blue trap. I want to end. I'll tell you one example. There was this very young kid, 2 kids whose parents go to this club, I think British club. As part of Christmas giveaways or something, they were giving out tickets for Resorts World. And these 2 kids who attended our talk, I think Louis was giving the talk, they wrote to the club and stopped them from giving out tickets to Resorts World.
Great.
So it's just 2 kids about, I can't tell the ages, go by size, about this size. No tickets to Resorts World, and the club actually stopped because it was so much powerful than Acres doing campaigns, So I think you guys can be the catalysts out there to speak up on an issue close to your heart. It doesn't have to be just on animals. It could be for seniors, for children, for environment, even for recycling efforts, something that's close to your heart. But of course, for tonight, I will appeal to you all to speak up for the animals.
Yeah, that is really a great simple message. I think individually we can play our part and reach out. And I think the voice of the community is always stronger, and I'm sure that if more of us speak up, they will start to hear us, and that will be great. And I think that is what our animals and our wild neighbors need, because we don't have voices of their own, and we are their voices, right? Yeah. So we need to make sure that we are voicing, we are speaking up for them, to our friends, our families, and I guess this is why this conversation is happening.